Good morning, everybody. Our first speaker this morning is Sandy Horn, who is one of our Piedmont chapter members from Cary. Her private garden in Cary contains more than 300 conifers and about 70 Japanese maples. Her garden, was featured during the American Conifer Society's national meeting here in 2018. Sandy is also the director of the Southeast region of the American Conifer Society. Her presentation today will tell us how dwarf and miniature conifers can enhance the texture, color, and year-round features in a rock garden, covering such items as how to choose the right conifer for your space and how to ensure its success. Our second speaker, a shorter talk of about 15 minutes long, will be one of our other chapter members, Tim Alderton, who works here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. He will give a brief talk on hardy Gesneriads. Now, this is a group of plants that you may think will grow only indoors. And the plant is related to African violets, so it's that type of plant. But there are hardy forms that have been collected in recent years, some of which are here at the Arboretum, and Tim will tell us about those. So let's first welcome Sandy Horn and her talk on conifers for the rock garden.
So this is really a perfect time of year to have this conversation about conifers, because here in the South, we do have some issues with what we can grow. And as you know, as rock gardeners, the plants that you put in your rock gardens, many of them are your best attempts to grow something that you love that really isn't suited for our gardens here in the South. And we conifer enthusiasts, and also I'm a rock gardener as well, obviously. I like to push the envelope too. And there are a lot of conifers that we can grow here, but almost all of them do better if planted in the fall and have a little bit of time to settle in before they're confronted with our tremendously hot and humid summers. So if you're thinking about putting conifers in your garden, now or early spring is the best time of year to do it. So that being said, one thing, if you are taking notes, that you might want to take note of is my email address, because later, if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And also, I can provide you with some specifics about where to get miniature and dwarf conifers you cannot get at your typical nursery. I'll tell you about them, and you might want to write down where these nurseries are and the names of the nurseries. But in case you don't have that information with you, just contact me at home and I'll send that to you. So the way this talk is going to go, we'll talk about the variety that you can get with conifers, why you might want to grow them, in other words, because a lot of people, when they look at a conifer in the South, they call it a pine, and it's about 70 feet tall, and that's not what we're going to be talking about today. So there's a whole lot of variety in the world of conifers. Then we'll talk about what they need in order to be successful here and what works in rock gardens, specifically the dwarves and miniatures, and how to figure out what you need for your own garden. And then we'll look at pictures of some of the conifers in my gardens and some companion plants that I especially like. So we'll start with variety. And a lot of people don't realize that pines, evergreens, etc. We think that they are evergreen. Well, not necessarily so. So there are a lot of conifers that are also deciduous. These, from firs to cedars to pines and hemlocks, they are evergreen. They retain their needles year round. You'll notice that I've got asterisks next to a few things. As I mentioned to begin with, a lot of people think that everything's a pine. Well, just because it's called something doesn't make it that thing. So Cryptomeria japonicus, they're called Japanese cedars, but they're not cedars at all. Podocoprices, Japanese yews, they're not yews. Cyodopatus verticillata, Japanese umbrella pines are not pines. So it helps to know a little bit of each, because when you go to a nursery or something like that, you might want to call it just by its common name. If the people there are in the know, which they should be, it won't be a problem. Now, deciduous conifers, the most common ones here in the South are, well, larches, which are not common in the South. I have attempted them, and I've attempted them. And if you are at somewhat higher elevation or somewhat further north, then you might be able to grow those beautiful trees. I just can't give it up, and yet I can only throw so much money at it. Now, the rest of them are ever so much easier to grow. So Metasequoia glyptostroboides, those are the dawn redwoods. There are several varieties of redwoods that are deciduous, but these are especially easy to grow here. And let's see. This is actually a dawn redwood in the wintertime. And we'll talk more about that specific tree a little bit later. Also, these back in here are taxodiums, which are cypresses, bald cypresses. Now, most people think of bald cypresses as something that grows in a swamp. No, not necessarily so. But one of the good things about them is that they can tolerate a whole lot more water than a lot of conifers. The Pseudolarix amabilis, it's a false larch. We actually have a very nice one in the old conifer collection here at JCRA. Now, why would you want to put these in your garden? Once again, when people think of conifers, they think of something that is dark green, pretty much. This is not necessarily so. As you can see, these are all from my garden, and they are not touched up. So this little Cryptomeria is that color in the spring. Cryptomerias tend to change colors over the seasons. But over here, this is a Colorado spruce that I especially like. This is a little deodar cedar. This is a juniper. And this is a pine. And you can see this is also a different kind of pine. They are all different colors, and they just make a beautiful arrangement within your garden. These are more. And believe it or not, this is not touched up. That's a juniper in the wintertime. Now, it was only that color 1 year. I don't know, it never got that brilliantly purple any other year. This is an Arizona cypress called chaparral. And these are Pinus heldrichii, which are Bosnian pines. You can see how they're offset here with this beautiful Elijah blue. And this is an Arizona cypress called blue ice. And also, they just add texture to your garden. You can see this beautiful low glow pine that offset by the wand flowers and the gentian, and down here some little pagoda hollies. And I just love this. This is a Virginia pine called Driscoll, offset by the Nephophias and skullcap, more Elijah blue. This is in my backyard. These are both bald cypresses of different kinds, different cultivars, same kind, but different cultivars. And then down here, smaller, different colored conifers. So you can have that soft draping look right next to something that same type of plant, but just looks entirely different. And this is from my foyer. This is that's a ball cypress. Once again, the chaparral. This is a hinoki cypress. Over here, some junipers. And this is, you know, these eucomises, these pineapple plants. This is a burgundy one. And you can see just the differences in texture here. It's just interesting. You can do so much with conifers. So if you want to grow conifers, you need to do your research, because there are, like with every other woody plant that you put into your garden, you need to know how big it's going to get and whether it's suitable for our climate, and then what does it need in terms of sun and moisture. And you know, you can look at the tags. That's fine. But keep in mind this. Does anybody know where Isley Nurseries is located? Tim?
Oregon.
It's located in Oregon, okay? The biggest conifer nurseries are located, commercial ones, are located in the Northwest. And they get to write the rules. So when they tell you that it's going to grow X number of inches per year, they're talking about in Oregon. If they say it'll take full sun, they're talking about in Oregon. Okay? So maybe, you know, they've shaded that a little bit to the rest of us. But keep in mind where these tags are coming from. So you can start with that. And it will, most of them, if they're good tags, will tell you a general idea of exposure, how much moisture it needs, the growth rate and size, and hardiness zones. But you need to do your own research as well. So how big is it going to get? This tree right here, I don't know whether you remember it, but there's this brilliantly blue little conifer. I said it was an Arizona cypress called blue ice. Well, that's a blue ice. That's that same tree about 5 years later, okay? And if you notice, it's about to eat my house. Now, in my defense, I bought that tree. It was one of the first ones that I bought, and I had a lot to learn. But right now, I am spending more time taking things out of my garden than putting them in. Dwarfs, and that's considered a dwarf. Dwarfs are not always small. They're just smaller than the species. Miniatures, according to the American Conifer Society, grow an inch or less per year. Dwarfs grow 6 inches or less per year. And remember that the label size usually refers to how big that tree will be in 10 years. Even miniatures do not stop growing when they are 10 years old. Also keep in mind that many of the plants that you buy are already several years old before you take them to your garden. Okay? So how to succeed? Climate. Well, you guys are all familiar with this. We are currently in 7B, I think, according to the latest USDA heat zone. And we kind of take that as gold. You know, that's where we are. If it says it'll grow there, then it'll grow here. Well, not necessarily. We're headed to 8, guys, and we all know it. So there is another thing that we can look at, and that is the American Horticultural Society heat zones, which is based entirely on days when the temperature exceeds 86 degrees. We are in heat zone 7, but not anymore, really. by this measure, Western Oregon is in zones 3, 4, and 5. So just keep that in mind as a reference point. There's Oregon. Here's us. Okay, so what you really need are these sunset climate zones. However, Sunset wants you to buy the maps, and you can hardly ever find these, and they are never on the tags. But why do you need these? Because we are in zone 32. And see if this doesn't better describe where we are than how many hot days we have, or our average low temperature, which is what the original, what the USDA heat zones are based on, is how cold it gets in the winter on average. Zone 32, which is where we are, the growing season is late March to early November. Rain falls yearly or between 40 and 50 inches on average. Right now, we've had just under 45 inches of rain this year as of yesterday. Winter lows are from 30 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit on average. Humidity is less oppressive here than in zone 31, which is right on the beach, okay? So this is it takes a whole lot more data into account. However, they don't attach that to the tags that we get. So this is zone 32. And there's Raleigh, right in the middle of it. This is zone 31. Okay, so given that we are limited naturally to a certain small group of conifers, how can we stretch that and make it more interesting? This is one of my favorite pictures. This is a little graph I had planted in my rock garden. And grafting is the way that most conifers are sold these days. The reason is that it takes a long time to root cuttings and then make them of a good size. Some trees are very hard to root. And beyond that, miniatures are especially hard to root. So what we want to do is take cuttings and apply them to a rootstock. Now, we can fool Mother Nature a little bit by effectively choosing the rootstock. So notice, these bigger leaves here, those are the sap leaders from the rootstock. And these tiny little leaves here are from the plant that we've grafted on. Now, the point of this whole picture and explanation is that in the world of conifers, for instance, firs in particular, let's say, I'm especially interested in firs because they're really beautiful and they don't like it here a whole lot. However, I have better success with firs than I do with a lot of pines here, primarily because these days you can get a whole lot of firs that are grafted onto Abies firma. So this is an Abies coreanus, so a Korean fir, but it is grafted onto is it Moma fir, Tim?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So what this means is that a lot of the characteristics of the rootstock are now protecting this more delicate graft. And so I have no problem growing Abies coreana now at all. And you can, usually, a lot of nurseries are doing this, but a lot of them will specify that as well. So what you need to do if you get a graft is to keep these pruned so that they don't take over the whole plant and leave them in place for a year or so until you're seeing buds and strong growth from the grafted plant. So that's one thing you can do. What else you need to know? Well, the vast majority of conifers need excellent drainage. So those are the words. I mean, you might as well just skip the part about moisture because it's going to say that. It needs good drainage, sharp draining soil, things like that. So if you know that, and if you know the sun requirements, then you should have a shot at growing conifers. It's not all that hard, although I will say in advance, growing miniatures is not an easy task. It's just like a lot of your rock garden plants. They're delicate. They're small. They have a small root structure. And so it takes a lot of attention in order to be successful with many of them. So there are a few more things that you can use to learn a lot more about conifers. And I think that's what we're going to next. Yeah, so you can go to the American Conifer Society site. We're in the process of completely redoing the database, so there may not be as much information there as there used to be, but there soon will be again. I sit on that board as well. So there's a huge database of information on conifers. There's lots of articles, there's lots of events in case you should want to attend. And what's really cool about American Conifer Society events is they always have these auctions where you can find rare and unusual conifers, and they're huge. So I've gotten a lot of my special plants from there. And so just go check it out. You might enjoy the site. Here's another place where I get a lot of information on plants. Hardiness zones, care, hazards, physical characteristics, habitats, edible uses, medicinal uses. This is a really fun site. I enjoy it a lot. Now, Larry Hatch is actually, he lives in Cary, and he's done this project for years upon years upon years upon years. This is one of the most recent books that he has out, Cultivars of Woody Plants, Pinus, but he also has everything you can possibly imagine on woody plants, not just woodies, but also perennials. You can check out what's on offer at cultivar.org. The books can be ordered from Amazon, or if you want to subscribe to the whole world of taxonomy and cultivars, which is important because it's always changing, you might want to sign up for the PDF version, which is easier to search. Excuse me. I told you my voice wasn't strong. Okay, and here's another really great place, conifers.org, the gymnosperm database, thousands and thousands of pages of wonderful stuff. So check that out. And now we'll get to my garden. So we'll start out mostly with dwarfs because this is the end of my garden, my front garden. I also have a bunch more in the back, but we'll stick with the front gardens today. So that's my house, and this end is the first rock garden that I had built. Now, Jeremy Smith built both of my rock gardens for me. This was before he got famous. But I was lucky enough to catch him at that point. So first things we're going to look at are the dawn redwoods and the ball cypresses, Metasequoia, Gryptostrobiades, and Taxodium disticum. They are deciduous. They grow in almost any kind of soil. They prefer sun, but you know that tall, weepy thing I showed you in the backyard? Those two trees are also Taxodium. They're also ball cypress. They get about 3 or 4 hours of sun a day. They do well with average moisture, but will sit in boggy ground as well. And they look their leaves look very much alike. The only way I can tell them apart, now Tim knows a bunch of other ways, I'm sure, is to remember this, alternating ball cypress. So in that case, the leaves are alternating like this. But with dawn redwoods, the leaves are exactly opposite each other. So it helps me out a lot because I'm not great at conifer identification. And they take extreme pruning. You can prune, and I have pruned my ball cypresses down to the wood and cut off the top 8 feet. And the next year they come back as popsicles, green popsicles. And you can keep them down to the ground, or you can pull off the leaves like this. This dawn redwood here, it could have leaves all the way to the ground, branches all the way to the ground. But I like, my garden is very crowded, so I like to plant things underneath things, and I prune them up. So this is Sherman's Nordlicht. So the reason they call it that is because this tree, in spring at least, has white tips to each leaf. This is what it looks like in September, and this is what it looks like in January. So they turn this beautiful rusty brown before the leaves fall off. It is a gorgeous tree, and it's been in my garden for some time. Now, this is a dawn redwood, and this is the way it looks, if you get lucky. So this one, it has some kind of thing going on with its photosynthetic process, such that it looks like this all the time. It's beautiful. However, not all of them will be this colorful. It depends. Right now, the only place I know that you can get this is from Mr. Maple, okay? But it likes full sun to part shade. I have one now. I had to replace this one because I neglected it too much, I guess, when it was small. And my new one is not nearly as colorful as this one, but you might get lucky. Now, this is called Gee Whiz. It was found by Gary G., who is a very important conifer plantsman. This, you can see it's got these little upturned ends to its draping, pendulous leaves. And I just really like it. I have another taxodium next to it that I keep cutting down to the ground so that Gee Whiz has a little more room to grow. I would say it's maybe 8 feet high now if I were standing next to it instead of it being elevated. One of the things I really like in connection with my conifers is to use succulents and succulent type plants. Now this is a good thing because as I said before, a lot of conifers really like dryish or quickly draining, not necessarily dry, but quickly draining soil. And so these plants just especially like it there. This little fern here is also one of my favorite dry, sunny ferns. And there's an Orostachus and a bunch of, there's an aloe and anyway, we'll see that a little bit later. This is a different ball cypress. Notice this is fully leafed out. The leaves on it are about this long. Totally different from Gee Whiz. It's called Little Leaf, and I don't know where you can get it. You're welcome to come and take a cutting of mine. This is one of the trees that roots very easily. Takes full sun to part shade. That's in full sun, average to moist. And this is a Driscoll pine, that Virginia pine right over there. So then we have these related plants that are the Eastern Arborvita, the Western red cedar. See, it's hyphenated to let you know it's not really a cedar. Anaeba arbovita, which is an elkhorn cedar, also not a cedar. Grows in almost any kind of soil, sun to part shade, really easy to grow. So if you're into just testing it out, I'll show you a little more of that later. But this is Concessorini. It's called a pancake, but it's not really, it's a globe. I don't know why they call it that, but it's an arbovita. It's sitting right there under the Sherman's Nordlich. And then this is Mother Lode. This is called Forever Goldie. It's a little wormwood that you might come across. It's a lot yellower than Powys Castle and the more traditional ones. And this is Golden Pacific Juniperus conferta. It's a shore juniper. Now, this is also something you might be interested in because it doesn't get big. It's a loropetalum called purple pixie. You can pick them up anywhere, just about it. But I have them growing in full sun and almost full shade. And so this is what this looks like in the wintertime. So it's one of those that changes colors. But then again, so does this pine. If you see, it's green here and it's yellow here. It's called Hillside Winter Gold, I think. Here's another drastic change. Okay, so this is May and February for a Thuyoxidentalis Rheingold. There is supposedly an improved version that's called Fire Chief. Is it better, Tim?
I don't know if it's better, but we grow.
What?
It's really easy. It's a really easy one. I don't know if it's any better.
Okay, yeah. But these are real easy to grow, so you might want one of those. And what's cool about them is you can shear them to any size. Here's a tree that you've seen millions of them. Well, I like them anyway, you know. And this is just framing my front door. So you can see winter, summer. They've been in the ground for 10 or 11 years, and there's no problem. They're easy to grow. Now, this is the elkhorn cedar that I was telling you about. This is Nana. It sits next to my foyer door. That's about right for its growth, part to mostly shade. So depending upon where your rock garden sits, you can find something for everything. This one, you have to keep it in the shade or it will just turn brown. Variegata. This is another elkhorn cedar. So now let's talk about some of the more interesting conifers. This is an Abies Coriana Blauerpif, and it stays fairly small. So for a medium-sized rock garden, this would be fine. They will take full sun to part shade and average to moist but well-drained soil. Hard to find, but I'll tell you all about where you can get them later on. This is this one lets me show you what is so cool about these Abies Coriana. They have this white undersurface to their curling needles, so you get to see a lot of white on these trees. That stays a manageable size as well. This is a little pine called Atco Goyo. I've had it in the ground, gosh, I don't know. That's about the size, it's about like this now after at least 5 years in the ground. But what's really cool, I wanted to show you this Colorado spruce called Thume. It stays small too. It's only, I would say, maybe 3 feet tall now and maybe 3.5 wide. But look at what it does in April. And it is the most beautiful powder blue. That's not enhanced during most of the year. But isn't that gorgeous? This is called low glow. And if you just want to have a backdrop for your rock garden, then that would work, but it does get big, wide, and about this tall. So that's up to you. But as you can see, it does add beautiful texture if you've got the space for it. Stony Brook, yeah, it would get big. If you leave it alone, it will. But I cut it back every year. I just take off any little branches, and I get this beautiful architectural form in my rock garden. And I can plant stuff underneath it. You could actually make it go vertical if you had the patience to stake it. Goldilocks, you can find this, but most people say you can't keep it alive for more than 3 years. And I've found that to be the case in my garden. I don't know. You know, I'm not the best gardener in the world. So anyway, it's easy to find and it's very pretty. Banderica, I've got this, and mine is about this wide by this high now, like that, and it's just perfect. Bosnian pines are fairly easy to grow. You'll find them everywhere. They have this deep, dark green color when they're mature. This is the pine that we're talking about here, Pinus strobus. So it's an eastern white pine, hillside winter gold. This was before I kind of let it trail a little bit, but that's what it looks like in January. This, on the other hand, is a juniper. Anybody can grow this, and I love this plant. One of the things you'll find out about miniatures and some dwarfs is that the majority of them are roundish in shape. And so you have to hunt for things that can grow vertically and give you that different perspective, that different look in your garden. And I love winter gold. It's easy to grow. It's beautiful. It stays about this wide. I have one that's about this tall now, and I've planted several of those around my garden. Very easy to grow, takes full sun, changes color. It's neat. Now, this is a Pinus pungens called Doughton Park, found by Bruce Appledorn and Scott Antrim, some of our North Carolina plantsmen. Most people think that this is a misspelling, but in actuality, there is a Pinus pungens, just like there is a Picea pungens, which is the Colorado spruce. This actually is, since it's a very new variety, nobody's really sure how big it's going to get. Mine's gotten bigger than that. Gold Drift is a Bob Fincham introduction. As you can see, it's very different times of year. This is its spring flush. And you'll see this cone, but you'll see it in a different color later on in the year. As a matter of fact, you can see the cones here have turned brown. It can be staked, or you can let it kind of wobble around, but you can see how pretty it is. Easy to grow. I have one in full sun, and I have one in 4 hours of sun. So this is another Colorado spruce called Hermanaui. These were actually taken in my garden, yes. I didn't, and you can just, it's glorious. And it's a little, about 3 feet by 2 foot plant after 4 or 5 years in my garden. It will never get very big. And Niagara Falls, just another one that I thought was pretty, and I thought I would show you. Eastern white pines. Not everybody has really good luck with eastern white pines, but I have no problem with them at all. And I live in downtown Cary. Now, one thing I do have problems with, though, is mugo pines, and there are very few that will work well here. Amber gold is doing okay. It's fine. But they're not as foolproof as some other plants. This one, however, is the best that I have found. It was, I bought it from Michael Balo, who is up in Weaverville, and he told me at the time, he said, you won't have any trouble growing this one, and I haven't. It's stayed beautiful, and it's been in the garden 7 years, so you can see it's not big. This one is now probably at the size it says it will be, 3 by 3 feet. This picture was taken a couple of years ago. And what's really cool about these is the texture of the leaves. People walk by it next to my driveway and they just want to pet it. Okay, so now a new garden for my miniatures. So as I pointed out before, this guy, you can see it's just not, it's out of proportion with the whole rest of the garden. And, you know, people will go, oh, but we love that tree. Yeah, well, fine, but that's the only tree I can have if I let it stay there. So, I took that down myself, guys. All it takes is a Hasagawa ladder and a chainsaw. You can do it. And hauled it to the dump myself, too. So this is what I started with. And this is what happened next. Oh, take note of this beautiful little, I don't know, does it show up? No, it doesn't. This is a beautiful eastern white pine called blue shag, and I love that tree. So anyway, there's that. And there's Jeremy. This is during the first day. So if you're wondering about what kind of soil I used like 30% permatil, 30% compost, 30% topsoil, maybe 40% permatil. I don't know. So that's what he's working with. This is Dr. Megan Fiedler. You may have heard lectures of hers. She and Jeremy are a team. And she's a beast out there, too. I'm not kidding. Watching that girl work, wow. So this is what it looked like at the end of one day. And there's that beautiful, my beautiful blue shag. So end of day 2, this is when they were finished with it. He made this path for me along the top, which I thought at the time was, well, I'm not sure about that. Well, oh yeah, you got to have a path. You got to be able to get to your plants. So now, tree's gone. Got a few things planted in there. And this is very, like new plantings. Because, and I know that for sure, because my blue shag is still there. Okay, so this is what it looked like about 2 years later, a year and a half later. No blue shag. Why? You remember seeing those pallets of boulders? Much too close to that tree. So it compacted the soil and the tree died. Ah, well. I look at every death as an opportunity. So this is just different sections of the rock garden. As you can see, once again, I like having the sun ferns and the sempervivum and all of these succulent type plants mixed in, along with a bunch of little veronica, this, that, and the other. This is a pine leaf dianthus, which it will take over your garden, but it's wonderful if you look at that texture. So anyway, we are now going to look at difficult to grow little tiny miniatures. So you'll be lucky to find a Frida. I got mine from Larry Stanley, who no longer has his nursery, but has been working with Conifer Kingdom and some other places, and he still keeps his hand in. So you can get in touch with Larry and talk to him if you ever get really interested in conifers. He's a hoot. Part sun to sun, average water. It's bluer in the summertime. It stays very small. Edsel woods. So a miniature Japanese red pine that, and you know, we are pushing the boundaries a little. If it gets 12 to 15 inches, then maybe it's a dwarf, but it's on the very low end. So full sun, average water. All of these are more or less taking the same kind of thing, or they wouldn't be in that garden. Pinus banksiana. Well, you've seen jack pines, and they're huge, right? Well, not this one. 1 to 2 feet in 10 years. They usually grow much further north, so they're iffy here. This is a mugo pine called Karstens, and that's the way it looks in the wintertime. It never loses being altogether. It's never altogether green. Sometimes it's always a little bit yellow. This is blue pygmy, and I really like this little juniper. I've got 2 of those. So they're about this and very dense, very, very nice little plants. And as you know, junipers are pretty easy to grow around here. It's called a creeping juniper. I have no idea why. Here is icebreaker. So you can find these. It's a little Abies coriaena, not that hard to grow here. If it's on Abies firma, always check for that. An Algerian fir called Drath. Now, these grow well here. Now, why? Because they like it dry, but also, you know, they can handle some moisture. Our humidity is the most challenge to them, but it's a beautiful tree, and so far I'm okay with it. If it's on Abies firma, once again. This guy, you wouldn't be able to get to the trunk. It's impossible. It's so small. So that one is not even going to grow an inch a year. Okay, so false cypresses grow well here. They're easy to grow. Usually you'll see a Nana or something like that, or a Nana aurea. But they also come in miniature varieties. And so this is one of those. It's not supposed to grow at all, looks like, right? This I got from Conifer Kingdom. It's a Norway spruce. You know we can grow these here. It will not be large, and it'll be perfect for a rock garden. It should survive here. Mine is. This is a little Japanese white pine. It's going to get larger than most of them. It's actually a dwarf, but it should work in the rock garden, and it's there primarily because of its shape. You know, it's not a globe. Zini, tiny, tiny, tiny. I've killed 2 of them. And the Blaukissen. Okay, so this is not one of my pictures. I got that from another gardener in Oregon. This is the way that, whoops. this is the way I received the plant. That's my plant. Zelenak, Bruce Appledorn has these. This is from the top, and this is, that one was on a standard. And I love Lebanese cedars. I just love them. This is also not one of my pictures because I couldn't get a picture that would display to you how the growing habits of these trees. Not all of them, but certainly hedgehog and Cary, which you're about to see, this is how they grow and this is how they feel, and that's how they are in my garden. But the sun was just too bright to bring that across for my plant, so I included that one, although it's not my photograph. So here's Cary. I love that tree. I just do. I'm very partial to the Lebanese cedars. This is just a little Scots pine called Michek. And now, I thought I would include a few that if your rock garden is in the shade, there's some lovely little hemlocks. Lewitt is easy to grow, and it stays very small, and it will grow in the shade. So look for that one. You can find them every now and then at the local nurseries. Butterball is a enoki cypress, and as you can see, it changes colors depending upon the time of year. This is a tiny, tiny little English yew. I love this. I've had this for years and years and years, and it stays about that size. That's its spring color. Many conifers have a spring flush where they'll have these beautiful golden colors. Average moisture, it says 3 years, but that I need to revise that. It's been like 6. This is a little spruce, white spruce, Alberta spruce. Stays about like this. This is one of Bruce Appledorn's plants. It's absolutely one of the best enoki cypresses that I've ever seen. Mine is currently maybe this tall, and I've had it for close to 10 years now. It stays beautifully green, no special treatment, flawlessly. It's just spectacular. If you think spectacular can be small. This is another false cypress called Fairy Puff. Mine's getting a little looser, and so I probably just cut it back a bunch. Chamaecypresses are really forgiving about that. Blue Planet, that's probably the smallest Alberta spruce you can get. Now, things that you might want to accompany your plants with, probably, Tim knows all of these, and I might have gotten a great many of them from here off of the plant cart. I haven't checked it out yet today, but this is a really interesting thing. And of course, you all know about big bloomers. So if I didn't get them here, I probably got them there, or from Tony, or some place that you have access to. This is a really cool Kaluna, a Scotch heather. And as you can see, it changes colors over the season quite drastically. I got this from Tony. It's Bomeria ispida, Gila dwarf, a copper fern, tiny little thing, just ½ inch off the ground, I'd say. The Delospermas, of course, they grow beautifully in a rock garden. And this little Veronica is also one of my favorites, a woolly speedwell. Easy to grow, Comes back year after year after year after year. And this is one of my very favorite rock garden plants, Bigeloia nutalii. It's a rayless goldenrod, so they say. I wouldn't know, but it even after it has bloomed, it has little seed heads that stay forever and ever. As you can see, I mean, this is across the board, January, August, and September. I love this little Achillea, this yarrow. It's about this big, and then when it blooms, it gets about this tall. Look at that texture on those leaves. Isn't that beautiful? I love this plant, but it's an annual for me. I can't keep them alive longer than that. I love this Orostachus that I got from Tony, Crazy Eddie. And by the way, it changes to a beautiful color in the fall. And these, you can get these at Big Bloomers, Chasmatophyllum muscalinum. They bloom and then they'll close up at night, and then they'll bloom and they'll close up at night. Long blooming season, just gorgeous, spring to fall. And they'll grow in any crack. And I like this, if for nothing else than the name. Pleopeltis lepidopterus. Sounds like a dinosaur. These will grow in full sun, in next to no moisture, and they're just gorgeous. That's really not a good picture of it. I got that from Tony for sure. And this I got off of the cart, and I want more. I want more. This is a narrow leaf, four-nerve daisy. So, Tim, I want more. They bloom forever, and they have, I really like it when their blooms are like this. That's not past a perfect bloom, actually. It just is the habit of it. Notice, see how the stems are so sinuous? That is a great plant. And you can get them here sometimes at JCRA. And that, I think, is it. So I appreciate your attention. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I will say this. If you're taking notes, there are two nurseries that specialize in miniature conifers. One is Bruce Appledorn's nursery in Bostic, North Carolina, which is about an hour southeast of Asheville, and Michael Balow's Mountain Meadows Nursery, which is in Weaverville, about 35 minutes at most north of Asheville. And since Mr. Maple is in Hendersonville, about half an hour south of Asheville, you should just plan on a weekend in Asheville and go and collect these wonderful plants. Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions? He says he is growing an Abies bournemurliana. It's a long word, and so I had to read it back in my mind. And whether that rootstock might be suitable in place of Abies firma, it's possible. I don't know enough about that, but what I can tell you is that I doubt there is sufficient rootstock. As it is, Abies firma rootstock is in short supply, at least according to the nurserymen that I know, and so they have to plan well ahead to get it. And I bet that Muliana is not produced that way. So that's probably why we don't see it. But if it grows well for you, then, you know.
Have you grown it?
I have not, no, because I don't know of any dwarf or miniatures, and my garden sits on half an acre in the middle of Cary. So I'm a block and a half off of Academy Street, and I have to really be careful about the size of the trees that I put in. Yes. Cyanodopatus. I have tried growing them before, and I am not good at it. I am not saying that that is difficult. I think Cindy has some, and I know several other people here have them, and it's just not been my luck.
I've never been able to keep one.
I can't keep one.
Supposedly, Cindy, do you know Tony? Not anymore. Yeah. Well, okay. So years and years ago, Tony Avent planted one on the fairgrounds, right? And it's huge, and it's still there. So if you want to look at one, they're beautiful trees. They are, but they're expensive. And so every now and then I'll throw more money at one and see what I can do. Anybody else? Yes.
Can you talk about anything you do to your soil to remediate or over time, where you just do it once and?
Well, I don't believe in throwing away leaves. And so I mulch them up every winter, and that's my mulch. I don't generally buy mulch because I have 100-foot trees surrounding my backyard. And so I use that, but I don't fertilize. And I rarely do anything to mess with the pH. I just let my plants be. For conifers and rock gardens, of course, permatil, lots of permatil. I have thought about sneaking in the back gate and stealing some from the big pile behind. Oh, that's what I was hoping my gift would be for being a speaker. Yes. He asked if I ever saw any cultivars of longleaf pine, which Pinus palestris. No. Well, if you'll send me the location, I'll tell Bruce and Scott, because they go out and find witches' brooms, which if you don't know, and I need to get out of here. If you don't know, witches' brooms are these clumps of malformed growths on living conifers and other trees, I assume. But when you take cuttings from those, then very often you'll get a different tree, and usually one that grows much smaller than the original tree on which it was made. Okay, now Tim has some very fascinating stuff.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, yeah. This is actually, I spoke with the Gesneriads Society in July in their annual meeting, and this is kind of an abridged version of that. So, Gesneriads are African violet relatives. They're not just houseplants. And so here, this is up in the geophyte border, and it's still flowering some right now, but this is one of the plants. This is, that I'll show you later on. This is Syningia. Bananas Foster. So that's just the beginning here, but we'll see what happens else. But anyways, some of the other plants that you might think of that are Gesneriads, you may have seen the florist gloxinias, which are actually Syningia as well, as that previous picture was. Syningia speciosa, and they don't always make good candidates for the landscape, but they could be worth a try. They may have some hardiness, but this was actually an old picture of JCs from probably back in the 70s. You don't see them as often as you used to, but you can still occasionally find them at nurseries and florists in the late winter and early spring. But they do have this tuber, which can be grown and planted outside. And this is one, I've killed this one a couple times, but I didn't know as much about growing them outside when I was growing this one. This is one Tony gave me called Carangola. Really wonderful color. I'd love to try it again, but in a different situation, which I might show you later on, how I might grow it instead, but in comparison to another one. But so some that are consistently hardy though for us here in the gardens, and this was probably one of the hardiest species, is Syningia tubiflora. It's quite fragrant. For us, it's a shy bloomer, but it can be a heavy bloomer if it's in the right situation. I think our plant is now getting more shade than it once. The border just up here used to get full blazing sun, but the Asian Valley to the other side of the pathway has now gotten a little bit taller and offering a bit more shade. But this is a plant that it spreads when it's happy. Actually, it doesn't even have to flower much, and it will spread, make large patches of small potato-like tubers underneath the soil surface. But when it does flower, spectacularly fragrant, sweet lemony fragrance in the night in particular, and it's pollinated by moths. So the other species that's really good for us here and has done great on the geophyte border is Syningia solovii. And there's hybrids between those, a lot of those, the Syningia solovii and tubiflora, which you'll see some again. This kit's quite large. This will easily get up to 3, sometimes even 4 feet if it's really happy. The tubers on these things are enormous. That is some of the things that make these so hardy for us. These tubers that are underground will survive our winters, totally dormant, and then resprout in the spring. And you get flowers from mid to late May until frost. With the heaviest flowering, though, early to midsummer. There still are blossoms on it right now. This is just a seedling that popped up in the border. Probably it's pretty much straight solovii. It might have something else mixed in it, but there's actually going to be one of these in our giveaway here a little bit later on. So candy corn is one I found, like I said, just popped up in the border, and then Doug Bruin named it a couple years ago. I don't know if I would have done that, but we do. It does have a little bit of distinction. The flower is pale yellow down here, and you get the coral shades up further on, but it grows just like solovii. I mentioned that there's hybrids, though, distinct hybrids with solovii and tubiflora, and this is one of them, Arkansas bells. It kind of picks up the characteristics of both of them. You get the bigger spikes, taller plant of the solovii, but you get these very long tubular flowers, and in this case, pink instead of the coral shades that you get from the solovii, and no white that from the tubiflora, but it's also lightly fragrant too, and it flowers over a very long time. It starts out a little bit clumpy when it's younger, and then it does ultimately sucker, or that is, become a bit stoloniferous and move about, but it's never a weed by any means, and it does great. This is probably flowering in May, and it's still, I could find some flowers on it yesterday, actually, when I was up in the border. And here it is a little bit closer. Oh, wait. Yeah, Arkansas bells. And here's a closer up one of that. Another one very similar is lovely. The difference between lovely and Arkansas bells, you can see Arkansas bells, they hang pretty much straight down. Lovely, they are out to the side. And it's a little bit paler pink, but both of these have been excellent in the landscape for us. There's another also very similar one, which I think it might have another species involved, but Carolyn, which looks very similar to this, which we have in the perennial border as well. But it has never been as a dense of grower and as heavy a flower for me. Not that to say that it couldn't be. Yet another one of the tubiflora hybrids, and I think this might have aggregata as its other parent, is butter and cream. And this one, it's a little bit better habit in that it doesn't run everywhere like tubiflora. It's a bit more upright. It's clumpy. And this has been over here in the Scree garden since about 2007. So it's diminished a little bit right now, but it is still there. It still makes a presence. I need to get another one started. Actually, we have some started in the east end of the perennial border now too. So. But great plants. Syningias have been the most versatile of the Gesneriads for us in the landscape. And Scarlet O'Hare is another of these really complex hybrids. And it includes solovii, aggregata, which I think comes along with apricot, something. I'm forgetting my names, but it's a complex hybrid. I don't have in the garden yet, but I do have some in the nursery that I was able to get from somebody from the Gesneriad Society this summer. But These flower over a very long time. Again, the entire summer. But wonderful flowering, a little bit larger flowers than that of Salovii, but on a plant that gets like 2.5 to 3, or probably about 3 to 4 feet tall actually at times. But and they're just profuse bloomers, and hummingbirds adore them. And then here's that Bananas Foster that I showed you in that entry slide. And just a soft yellow, which it picks up a little bit of pink tones and corally tones, especially when in the late spring and when it first starts to flower, and then again in the fall when the temperatures cool off. And the summer flowers tend to be just a pure creamy yellow on that. This is actually a picture at Plant Delights, but we do have this in the garden as well. Cherry's Jubilee, and again, it's on that same line as all these. These Syningia hybrids have been excellent for us. There's a little bit closer up view. There are some other species. I've had this in the past. I have not kept this one long. I need to try and get this one again, but this is Syningia arenosa. It's a much smaller growing one for us, only about maybe 10 to 12 inches tall, but that spectacular red blossom is wonderful. So these are the ones that are impressing me. So in this picture here, we have Syningia eumorpha, along with carex, some of the native carex. The carex have petered out in the garden, actually. But the Syningias have persisted. And this is out at the pedestrian entrance. And so these are getting half shade, more or less. And they flower off and on through most of the summer, starting in late June. And there were still some flowers on them the last couple of weeks. There aren't a whole lot now, but still a few there. I think this is a situation, if I were to replant ever the Syningia speciosas like carangola, I think I'd put it in this situation where there's a little bit more shade and actually do irrigate this bed on occasion. But I love these ones. There's some other forms I'd really love to get a hold of eumorpha that are purple shades as well, similar to that of the carangola. And there's just another view of that. I just love the slippers, like a foxglove. And this is another one I don't have anymore, but apparently it is short-lived. We had this for like 3 or 4 years when I first did the scree over here, and it did flower beautifully. It's also another one that's fragrant. It smells of lily of the valley, one of my favorite fragrances all times. Just a pastel yellow. I have a cutting in the nursery from a leaf. I was able to get it again at the Gesneriads Society this summer, and so hopefully I'll get it back in the garden. But it gets about 10 to 12 inches tall at most. But it has bigger leaves, much like the eumorpha. Then there's these hybrids with conspicua and a few other species, which you can find from now and again. This is one that was at Piedmont. I've never, again, the conspicua, they tend to be short-lived when they have that in them. So you have to repropagate them or you do lose them. But these are just some other ones. That California Gold and Pink Pockets and Georgia Peach are just some ones you can find sometimes that Tony offers at Juniper Level Botanic Garden Plant Delights Nursery sometimes. So there are, having been to the Gesneriads Society this past summer, there are so many Gesneriads, especially Syningia, that I would love to try. But moving on from the Syningias, which are actually probably the most versatile group for us. There's a few others that have been really good for us, and this is one that's been excellent. It's a late summer flowering plant. We have one over here to give away, but it's flowering right now in the garden, has for decades now. But this is one Tony Avent brought back from Argentina, I believe in the late 90s, early 2000s. He brought this back, Simania nematothoides evita. You'll see it as Gloxinia nematothoides evita. Lumping and splitting. There's slight morphological differences between a Simania and a Gloxinia, but they have these scaly little rhizomes that look like caterpillars that overwinter, but it does spread readily. And it's, again, wonderful late summer flowers on that, and such vibrant color. And hummingbirds, again, pollinate this. There's a hybrid that was made with Simania purpurea, which I don't know, I saw you carrying one earlier. Was that? Yeah, you have one over here. And anyways, with Seemannia purpurea and Seemannia nematothoides, and you get this little red. This is from a guy, I can't think of his name at this moment, but he's at the Smithsonian, and he's done. Thank you. What was it again? Yeah, is it John? John Boggin is the fellow's name. He's done some really cool breeding, and this has been excellent for us here. It's more upright than Seemannia nematothoides, evita, but you also get the dark stems from the purpurescence, and it's just made a really good perennial for us. And here's a little bit more close up. Made its glow. And this one, I had mixed results with this one. It really impressed me last year. It came through, it's been through 2 winters in the lath house now, but this year it's kind of fizzled. I think it needs a little more sunlight, and it's actually getting overtaken by the adjacent hydrangea that's now at this point. But this is Seemannia sylvatica, Bolivian sunset. We've had other Seemannia sylvaticas in the past, and they flower so late that we often don't get any flowers. This one last year was flowering in late September, early October. So it actually flowered early enough that we did get a decent display. I don't think I'm going to get any flowers this year. We have one in the nursery though that is flowering as a backup. So, but like I said, I think it wants a little bit more sun than some of the others. It does not spread like Little Red or Uvita everywhere. So those were really consistent blooming ones over a long time for the most part, but we're getting to another group of them. There's some from that look more like the true African violets, and they're from Europe. Actually, there's 2 genera in Europe of Gesneriads, as well as countless ones in Southeast Asia, and we're starting to grow a few of those. But this is one of the European ones, Herberlia rhodopensis, which is a species from Greece, as its name name shows right there with the rhodopensis. I've had this for a while. I think I have lost it at this point, but I probably had it for 6 or 7 years. To me, these are a little bit more difficult to keep, but in a rock garden they'd be perfect because they squeeze into a spot. You can see them. In the open garden, they're a little more challenging. And when you have 7,000 other plants to keep track of, sometimes you forget about them. So, but anyways, this is one to try if you can find it. I've seen beautiful ones like this clump here, which is at the Denver Botanic Garden in their rock alpine garden. I've also seen it in Michigan, and that's actually in Michigan. And when I think Bobby and Nancy and I think Amelia and Richard might have been there as well on one of the garden tours. And that was in May of 14 or 15, I can't remember now. Another one, this is also in Michigan right here, but is the Ramonda myconi, and there's another species of Ramonda or 2, but they're also European, and so they can take the cold, no problem. I have not gotten any of these established in the garden, but I really should try. They're growing on tufa right here, which is kind of cool. And here's one in flower, and this was actually in Oregon, in a garden, actually a gravel garden. So they will grow and flower, and they should be fine here. It's just I just haven't gotten the right spot. But again, these look more like your traditional African violet-like plants. This is one from Plant Delights a few years ago. I don't know if this one has persisted, but we are finding more Orocaris species. This is Orocaris auriculata, but we're finding more the Orocaris species that will grow here, and some of them are becoming available. One that we've had now since 2012 in the garden, and Tony's had it longer, is Orocaris, and I can't spit out the name, Pancayue, something like that. I like the old name Trematricon Aurantiacum. I'm getting dry mouth now too, so it's even more difficult to spit these out. This year I haven't had any flowers, but it flowers most year quite well. But again, they have just a really short window that I ever get flowers, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month if we're really good on these. So, but it's just the fact that you can have something that's an African violet relative that kind of looks like one. These are really cool little things though. And there's a close-up one of that. This is flowering right now in the lath house, and we've had this in there for 3 years now, I think, or maybe 3 or 4 years. Briggsea longipiece, and the flowers on that are, they're about 1.5 inches long. So it is impressive. This is just as you walk right in from the east side, and as you turn the corner. I lost my mic. Yeah, it's blinking. Is that a bad sign? Yeah. How long will it take?
They can hear you over Zoom.
They can hear me over Zoom? Then I can talk louder in here if that's the case. So anyways, this is another one of those that looks like that traditional African violet. There or back. But just exquisite flowers on this right now. There's just a handful of them. It's towards the end of its flowering. Well, this is another one we have in the lath house, and it flowered earlier in the year. It's not flowering right now, but this is last year. This is Primulina gliguliformis. We received this just as an unknown Gesneriad from the rhododendron species garden in Washington a few years ago, and we've since been able to have it identified for us. And I don't know if anybody knows what chiridas are, which is what the primulinas are now. Chiridas used to be, are now primulina for the most part. And they're grown as houseplants again. They're from Southeast Asia, as was that Briggsea and those Oricharis. But this thing is so fleshy. It is just like an African violet. But I was just amazed that we found a primulina that would survive outside here, and it was unfazed. It's been through the last 2 winters, so we got down to, about 9 last winter. So I think this is one that has promise. I need to try some more primulinas. So some others, I saw some of the plants I had over there, and I have a hemiboea over there, but this is the one that probably most of you have if you have a hemiboea. This is Hemiboea subcapitata. It will spread everywhere. It's very vigorous. And this is a selection that we grew from seed that Mark brought back from Taiwan, and I don't remember which year now, but it flowers way earlier than the typical form that we were growing in the past that would just do late summer and into the fall. This starts in as early as the end of June, 1st of July, and it goes. But it's at a little bit smaller flowered form, a bit. But you just don't put it next to anything that you have highly prized. It will eat it up. And the same with this one here, Hemiboea sebacalis variety Jiangxiensis. Jiangxi bells. This is another one that Mark collected, and it's been introduced now and named. And this is in full flower right now. It's later flowering than the subcapitatas. And it's heavy flowering. This is actually just right up here in Asian Valley, but we have it in 2 locations in the lath house. And it's eating up its neighbors as well. But the foliage is wonderful on this, and the flowers are exquisite. And there's just a close-up of those flowers. And so there is actually one of these right over here on the table. This is Hemiboea cavalerii. I'm still getting used to this one. It's a little different. It's a little more upright. It does want to spread, yes, but not the way the others have. It's shyer to flower, and it's just a creamy yellow. I don't know if ours has any blossoms yet right now at this time. It's real late to flower. So anyways, but there is one over here. Another yellow flowered Gesneriad that has been around for a long time and is a great one for us here is Titanotrichum oldhamii. These things, there's very little variation. There's only a couple different clones in the country, and they are all very similar except for different things, subtleties between them. I was even asking some people about them at the Gesneriad Society. But it can start flowering as early as late July, but typically August and September is when you start to see the flowers. There are some up on ours this year. It's not as vigorous this year. I need to divide it and reset it. It is a really good doer typically. If we have a really mild winter and long fall, I should say, it produces plantlets on the flower stalks, which will drop down. If you grow it in a greenhouse, it will definitely do it, and it may come up as a weed. They're all clonal.
Look for it on the plant.
Not right now, but yeah. In the past, we have done that. So, but there's just a close-up of one of them. And this is one that has truly surprised me. An Ascanthus buxifolius. This is one of the lipstick plants. So these typically grow as epiphytes where they're native. I haven't gotten many flowers, but this was last year. It had like 2 or 3 flowers on it, and I think that there's some buds on it right now. I haven't looked to see if any of them opened this year. And it's only like 6 inches tall. But I am just amazed. It's a little evergreen Gesneriad. That, like I said, it grows as an epiphyte in Southeast Asia where it's native.
Is it in the lab house?
It's in the lath house, hiding, but it's right along a path. You just don't notice it. It's tiny. So that's a close-up of a flower of that. And we are trying some other things. These were just some that were in the nursery. Mark has planted a bunch out in a hidden place that you can't get to. And we did have some flowers of some other Gesneriads this summer, and I don't have those yet. I should have taken pictures, but I didn't, and to put in this. But we're going to find out what else we can grow here. So there are more. Actually, this one up here, this is actually an annual. I did not know there were annual Gesneriads. And I put some of this on the cascade out here. I'm hoping it self-sows, or did self-sow. It's finished flowering at this point, and I think is senescing. But I just want to see what will happen. There's purple flowered forms of this species too. And I'd love to get a hold of them and just grow them as an annual and see what happens. More Oricaris. These Raphiocarpus, they have possibilities. I have another Gesneriad over there, and I can't spit its name out without reading it. So Pudding's a cultivar. They're borderline for us. Mark had it survived for him last winter. The last couple winters, actually, but they've been mild. So don't know what they're going to do long term. But we're still figuring things out, and they're still bringing, we're finding sources for some of these to see what will grow here. So that's the end of my little presentation. Any questions?
Growing conditions.
It varies. So the Syningias, those big growing Syningias, full sun, part shade. But I showed you Syningia eumorpha. I've been growing that best in part shade to half shade. Evenly moist soils are ideal probably for that, but the larger growing Syningias, they want excellent drainage. So they've been super easy for us. We grow them in the scree, I grow them in the geophyte border, I have them in the perennial border. They're pretty versatile. The Simanias, they typically just an evenly moist soil through the summer months. They will freeze back and dry up and just be, like I said, it looks like little caterpillars, the rhizomes, they're scaly rhizomes. They just don't want to be wet during the winter. The rosette forming ones, which are evergreen, they they just need good drainage and to survive. Yes.
It's beautiful.
I have a eugodonia that survives, but I never get any flowers out of it.
So it might be harder.
It might be hardy. And again, they're really similar to the habit of, that is the rhizome is very similar to that of the Simanias. So, and you can, you can take some of your spare ones and stick them out and see what happens. There's some other things that we've had. Some of the Achimenies can be hardy. I haven't gotten any established in the garden here, but Tony Avent has had them. I wanted to try some Coolurias at some point. They should have a possibility of being grown here as well. They all have a very little scaly rhizome, and they're South American ones. So there's things that we can try. Any other?
So I have a question. Do you propagate these like you do with African violet?
You can do, some of them you can do by leaves. A lot of them are done by stem cuttings. Yeah.
And what about the wintertime? Do you put leaves on top of them?
I let them go. The question is, do I protect any of them in the winter? No, I don't have time to do that here. And the Syningias in particular, I don't do anything to them. Some of them, I mean, I'll lose a handful of tubers. The top of the tuber might get burnt, but there's axillary buds further down. They're fine and dandy for us. We've had 3 through in 2018, and I didn't lose anything. So.